how to use AI and why AI was created, I think is important for them to realize.
Hong Kong celebrity Christie Chung was in Singapore to launch a new slimming technology by Marie-France Bodyline.
Fundamentally, you need to have a baseline of a knowledge.
Why AI was created?
Literally over 10 years ago, people will find everything in a Google search window.
To not be afraid of it. During World War II, there were a lot of women that served as human computers. AI can pick out faces a little bit better than humans.
What do you think where this is all heading?
This human bias exists.
Learn how to ask questions.
It just keeps progressing in a negative way.
And I challenge myself.
AI becomes part of our lives. You could write a business plan in a day. It's amazing, but that plan needs to be modified.
If you just blindly are always scratching the surface and then you take everything for granted, that's a dangerous future. Welcome to our AI Unplugged Without Borders video podcast series, part of the Transatlantic AI Exchange. Now, today's topic is about the role of cognitive science and neuroscience in shaping the future of AI innovation, particularly in enhancing human-centered design. I'm here at the Mills Institute's Oakland, California campus, joined by Christie Chung, PhD, as she explores the pivotal intersection of cognitive science and artificial intelligence through a humanics-driven lens, outlining how we can create more intuitive, ethical, and human-centered applications that foster innovation while ensuring responsibility and privacy-conscious use. Christie is an award-winning academic leader, executive director, and professor in cognitive psychology. She has an extensive research expertise in cognitive aging, emotional memory, and cross-cultural cognition. Dr. Chung has served in a variety of senior leadership roles and is committed to empowering leaders to reach out their full potential through her work in executive coaching and consulting. She currently serves as the executive director of the Mills Institute and is dedicated to develop transformative programs and research to drive positive societal impact through a humanics-driven lens. As always, I'm your host, Thomas Neubert, born and raised in Germany, a longtime entrepreneur and corporate executive here in Silicon Valley, California, and I am the founder of the Transatlantic AI Exchange. So welcome, and let's get to it. Thank you. Welcome, everybody, to yet another AI Unplugged Without Borders. I am here back in the North Bay in beautiful Oakland, and I just drove into a campus that I've never been before, and I have to say it is stunningly beautiful. This building here is awesome, and I'm actually, to be more precise, at the Northeastern University campus here in Oakland, and there is this beautiful building here for the Mills Institute that's based here. And I'm here with Christie. I just introduced her a second ago. And I would like maybe, first of all, thank you very much for taking the time to speak to our audience. When I met you and I listened to your TED Talk, I was fascinated about the topic. You probably tell us more what this is all about. I think it's very relevant for society in general. But I hope it's also interesting for our audience to hear a little bit more of the details of how do you see this particular topic and how it relates to entrepreneurship, ideas, use cases, and things like that. So Christie, with that, maybe a quick introduction, what this beautiful place is all about, what's the purpose, what the mission, and then we have a few questions prepared to dive a little bit more into the details. So welcome.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Thomas, for inviting me to be on this podcast. So I am Christie Chung. I am the executive director of the Mills Institute at Northeastern University on this beautiful campus, Northeastern Oakland campus. So the mission of the Institute is really to advance equity in terms of gender equity and racial justice. And we were created 2 years ago at the historic merger between Mills College and Northeastern University.
Okay.
So our goal is to continue to advance the legacy of Mills College, which used to be a women's college.
So, and how long has that been around from the historical perspective?
So Mills College was a women's college for 169 years.
Wow.
At the merger. So 2 years ago, we merged with Northeastern University. and the Mills Institute was created.
A female college in Silicon Valley. Interesting.
Yes, here in Oakland, California, and we had been here for 169 years. So very, very long legacy, very long history, and we're excited to be able to continue to do this work into the future.
Excellent. I learned something new. I had no idea. So maybe what are the kind of courses, what is the mission for particularly the Mills Institute going forward?
Yeah, very good question. So the Mills Institute is a multidisciplinary institute at Northeastern University. So even though we're headquartered here in Oakland, our work actually spans the whole global network. And Northeastern is a global university, so we have many campuses all around the world, actually, not just the country. We have a Silicon Valley campus, for example. Here in Oakland, we have a campus. We have a campus in London, in Vancouver, Toronto, and more. And of course, Boston, right?
Boston.
Yeah, so the main campus is in Boston, but we're really worldwide. So the work of the Mills Institute is global. And our goal really is to build a world-class institute so that we could continue to advance the legacy in women's gender equity and also in racial justice.
Okay.
So lots of different programs.
Lots of different programs.
Yes, research as well.
Tell me a little bit more before we go into these specific questions. And we want to talk about the advanced equity through AI and cognitive science. Now, these are big words.
Yeah.
Some people may not exactly know what this is all about, but on a high level, before we dive a little bit deeper, what's your particular background? What are you passionate about? I listened to your TED Talk.
Right.
I really liked it. But if you can give that a little bit as a background to the audience, that would be wonderful.
Yeah, thank you. So I am a cognitive psychologist by training, and I have research expertise in cognitive aging and emotional memory, as well as cross-cultural cognition. So I actually do research throughout the world in looking at how cognitive thinking and memory change, amongst the different countries and contexts around the world. So the goal of the TED Talk really is to kind of put together some really interesting topics that I used to teach in class, but now are in everyday conversations, right? AI is a conversation that you probably have every time you see someone at dinner parties, in the classroom, even faculty retreats, right? We often talk about, so what are we going to do in this era of AI?
Yeah.
And I myself, I've been a professor for many years and then became a leader at the university, but have been teaching about AI in the classroom basically throughout my career. So it's not a new conversation for me, but at the same time, it's fascinating to see how AI is being understood, nowadays in everyday conversations. Yeah. And AI, which really means, kind of artificial intelligence, is almost the opposite of the coin when you think about human intelligence, right? So I am a cognitive psychologist. I study the brain. I actually study how human intelligence works and also how memory functions. So in a way, I'm studying the piece that artificial intelligence is trying to simulate. So to me, the conversation about how using AI to advance our lives and our human efficiency is extremely fascinating. And I think you can't really do that work without understanding the brain. You really cannot do, equity work without understanding the brain as well.
So I am totally fascinated about the topic itself. Yeah. A question just popped up, and this is unscripted, so I just throw it out there. I spent many years heading up a global sales group for Intel for 3D perceptual computing, which is directly related a lot to robotics. And I had a lot of customers. The famous dog has 5 of my cameras in there. Where do you see the future of robotics and cognitive, behavior? Where do you personally as an individual see that going?
That's a very good question. And it's funny that you mentioned this because my daughter just asked me, can we get a robotic dog? And in a way, right? I mean, in a way, that is where we're kind of going in the society, right? There are many things that we're trying to think, can we actually replace this with artificial intelligence? Even the bonding with an animal, right? Because I have allergies. I can't have a real dog at home. So my daughter was like, how about a computer one? How about a robotic one? So in my mind, I think there are many things that we could potentially simulate using computer systems, technology. Yeah. And really, I mean, technology and computers were created for that purpose, right? To help us function more efficiently. and, to do things faster in a way. But there are also certain things that we can never replace, right? For example, the connection with humans or even with the dog, right? That type of connection is different when it's a live person or a live animal versus robotics. But I think technology is advancing so quickly that at some point we may be able to get to a level where we can kind of simulate that type of relationship, but we're not there yet.
So
Definitely.
6-7 years ago, I spent most of my time in Asia, particularly Japan.
Right.
And during that time, I interacted with many companies in Japan, particularly Japan. Japan is crazy when it comes to robotics. And they literally already had commonly introduced little robots like cats and dogs.
Right.
And I went to an elderly home to demo this, and they were completely adapted to these, communication and the behavior. It touched and felt like almost like a real dog. I told the story then to my parents in Germany. Man, is there a cultural barrier between the European conservative Western world and then the Japanese far out robotic adoption? So there was a cultural difference that I still don't think has been overcome. Anyway, that was a side question. We have very incredible questions here. So let me start with the first one. How do you envision the role of cognitive science and neuroscience in shaping the future of AI innovation, particularly in enhancing human-centered design?
Yeah, great question. I think human-centered design is probably key in this question, right? So as a cognitive psychologist, I study how we see the world, how we perceive the world, and how we remember things in the world. And ultimately, technical systems, computers, were created in the 1940s to kind of aid in that process, right? For example, during World War II, there were a lot of women that served as human computers. But because their work was so intense and there's so much, we needed to create machines to help and make them more efficient. So fast forward to today, I think computer systems, AI tools still serve that purpose. But we really want to create something that is human-centered because we want to function in a way that is efficient, that would help us, do better in our lives. So in order to truly function in that particular way and create and innovate in a human-centered way, I think we really need to understand how the brain works, how human behaviors actually happen, right? And a lot of that is due to the hidden processes, which we call cognitive processes, that you can't really see, but you see the result of, right? So for example, memory. I study memory, and I think we all know what memory is, right? When you say, oh, I remember going to the dentist last week, that's a memory. Or remembering to come here to meet with Christie today, that's also a memory. However, how do you represent that? What is that representation in your brain? And actually, there are many, many types of memories out there. So to truly be able to innovate and to create something efficient for human use, we need to understand those processes and to also understand that there are individual differences, right, in the way that people see the world. So through some of my research, I do cross-cultural cognition work. It's really, really striking sometimes how even one picture could mean something completely different from culture to culture.
Maybe that example with the champagne glass, if you want to share it. I thought I made a note actually that stuck in my head.
Yes. Champagne glasses, right? So, when you think about champagne glasses, I think in Western world, we usually think of it as a positive picture. And actually, that was what we found, throughout our testing here in the US, in the UK, and Canada. Most people rated a picture like this as positive. However, when we brought that same stimulus to Afghanistan, which is a country that is a little bit different from the culture here, it's also a little bit more collectivistic. It's also war-torn, right? At the time when we did this research about 10 years ago, that picture was rated as completely negative. And the main reason for that is because alcohol is banned in the country. So nobody's going to say, oh, champagne and champagne glasses is going to bring me joy, because they would be punished if they were to drink.
So that kind of a different viewpoint, cultural backgrounds, how is that being reflected in all the work at the moment that goes into AI, building all these giant models. Are you concerned? Is there something that needs to be done better?
Right.
Where do you see that's happening, Riam? Because it's a big topic with, the models are unfair, particularly towards, people of color or females or whatever. What's your take on that?
Yeah, definitely. I think there are two things that we could consider. I mean, first of all, the LLMs may not be representative, mainly because of where the data may be coming from.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, there's a bigger societal structure issue where leadership, for example, in AI technology or really in any sector, right, is not representative of the general population. So some of that work, I think, is really critical to addressing biases, because biases, no matter where you see biases, AI or in real life, comes from us, right? It comes from human beings. And the biases are somewhat ingrained in our society because of how we see the world and maybe how we're taught in our homes. But that comes from somewhere. So addressing the root of that issue, I think, is really the key in addressing the biases that we see in technology. And some of the things that we're doing at the Mills Institute, for example, is creating programs so that we could encourage more people from underrepresented backgrounds, marginalized populations to take up leadership positions in STEM technology fields in the future. But not just that, right? To really see themselves as leaders and to be able to say that I would like to create a world that is more just. Because it's not just about providing opportunities for a subset of the population. Our work is about the world. It's about making the world more equitable. And when the world is more equitable, you would start to see it reflected in human behaviors and also in technology. It's a broad question.
It is a broad question. Do you have any interesting use cases or startup examples where with the adoption of AI, things are going into the right direction, or in some cases there may be use cases that they weren't able to pursue without AI in the past? Do you have any examples for our audience to share?
Yeah, so I actually have a really interesting example that's based on a brand new paper in cognitive psychology in terms of law enforcement. So in law enforcement and cognitive psychology, there is actually a topic called own race bias, which means that we usually recognize faces of our own race a little bit better. And people of a different race from ourselves, we may not make as accurate of a judgment in terms of, yes, I've seen this person, or no, I haven't seen this person. So in law enforcement, that is critical, because in eyewitness testimony, if you rely on the person's memory of a crime scene, for example, then you can potentially ruin someone's life, right? Saying that, oh, I saw that person in a robbery, but they were actually not there. So that type of work has always been really critical in psychology. But then we realized that this human bias exists because, of the way that we live. Recently, there are actually researchers looking into this with an AI model. And they actually found that AI can pick out faces a little bit better than humans across gender and race, even in conditions that are very blurry and very quick.
If it's trained well.
If it's trained
with
well.
clean data.
Exactly. So there's some preliminary data right now. There's actually a new paper that was recently published that has shown some promise in that area. And if that is truly the case, then I think we're moving towards a place where we can potentially use AI for equity purposes in something as big as law enforcement.
Do you by any chance have that title of the article to share right now?
Yes. It's actually done by a few researchers based on a group in London. Her name is, so my friend who does this work, her name is Laura Mikas. And I actually mentioned this in my paper that I recently wrote. So we can definitely share it with the audience.
So then pretty much if they check you out on the internet, they will find the reference to the article.
Yeah, they will find the reference.
For the audience here and for the listeners, I'm pointing it out particularly because in between this conversation, between the lines, I can see some very interesting to be explored use cases with this new technologies, let's say based on the white paper, for an entrepreneur who is looking for problems to be solved and start a company around it.
Right, exactly. I think there's a lot of different uses and also different applications. So what I just said is really just one example. Another example is actually in the area of Alzheimer's disease and medical use. So as you all probably know, Alzheimer's disease currently doesn't have a cure, and it is a neurodegenerative disorder, which means once you're diagnosed with it, it just keeps progressing in a negative way, right?
Mhm.
But you can kind of slow down the progression, but you can't stop it.
Yeah.
However, there are some new models, some AI new models that are allowing us to kind of predict Alzheimer's diagnosis even 7 years before a person gets Alzheimer's. And so, that is huge, right? Because in a way, if you're able to predict that this person may eventually develop dementia and Alzheimer's disease, then you could do something to kind of slow down that process. And even if you slow it down for about 10 years, you give that person a quality of life that is so much better than having to live with the illness. So basically what they have found is that with a lot of medical data, they have found that illnesses such as hypertension, high cholesterol could be a predictor of Alzheimer's disease. Okay. And for women in particular, it's actually osteoporosis. So so knowing if you have those illnesses, what are some ways to prevent your brain from degenerating? It's a huge breakthrough.
Yeah.
So AI can actually help us do that because it could bring in so much.
So these are the really interesting use cases that are here and out, particularly in areas of medical, nanotechnology, biotechnology.
Right.
I'm actually involved in 2 startup companies. One is with AI grants about female fertility. And then the other one is about colon cancer. Diagnose it at home in real time.
Wow.
Without sending anything
that's helpful
to anybody.
Yeah.
It's just over the internet with a model in the cloud. So these are the interesting opportunities I like to get across to the audience. Maybe something else. There was this one question here. Your research highlights to impact cultural differences on memory and perception. We talked about this just a little bit.
Right.
But tell us a little bit more about the AI systems and how they may be designed to account for these cultural variations to create more equitability, inclusion, user experiences globally. We touched on this a little bit with the champagne glass.
Right.
But in general, the cultural differences, it's obviously there in real life, right? Mm-hmm. The biases in some of the models, we know it has been an issue from day one, and regulations so far haven't really been put in place, or pressure on the people who are like the open AIs to do something more and open up what's in the model. Do you have any suggestions based on your research, what either the big companies must do and should do, what regulations have to be in place in the future? What's your take on that? And what are you teaching your students here when you talk about these topics?
I think in terms of what we tell the students, I think it's really important for them to kind of be able to discern what's misinformation and what's not, right? Because ultimately, I think the world is just going to move so quickly in the area of AI that they're going to use AI, right, no matter what. But how to use AI and why AI was created, I think is important for them to realize, because ultimately, I think for example, when ChatGPT first came out, a lot of students were afraid to even touch it because that's considered cheating. But ultimately, it was created so that we could actually be more efficient. For example, in brainstorming, right, ideas to write a paper, or to use it as a test companion. Right? Some of our students were telling us that, I put in some questions and it allowed me to review my chapter even faster. So I think what's really important for us to tell the students and everyone else, right? Because students learn from others too, from their professors and staff members on campus, is the reason why AI was created. It really is a tool for us to do things better, and to know that not everything is accurate, right, from an AI system. For example, when they put in a question in ChatGPT and it tells them that, this is what this particular essay is about, they have to use the critical eye to look at it and to really think, is this telling me the truth?
But do your students do that?
I think that's what we need to teach them. I think that is the teaching that needs to happen in the classroom. And that includes education for our faculty, right? For all of us, really, leaders who are trying to make sure that AI becomes part of our lives. in a way that is useful and efficient, and to not be afraid of it, because ultimately we created AI, right? Humans created AI, and it's supposed to make our lives easier so that, certain type of tasks that are a little bit more tedious can be done by an AI system. And then we could focus on things that are a little bit more intimate, that's human, things such as creativity, leadership, critical thinking, all those things that are core to the mission of education actually has not changed. And eventually we're going to do it better, right? Because there are certain things that we don't have to pay attention to.
And the one that you just mentioned, I think they need to be much more amplified.
Yes,
I had this conversation literally over 10 years ago with a brilliant professor at Stanford when all these MOOCs came out.
Right.
And we had this conversation and I said, so Paul, what do you think where this is all heading? And I didn't get the message that he told me literally over 10 years ago.
Right.
And he said, I foresee, and this is when we talked about just Google search, not even AI and ChatGPT, right? And he says, the younger generation and all of us, particularly the younger generation, we need to educate them better on critical thinking and learn how to ask question and keep questioning. And I said, what do you mean by that? And he says, in the future, people will find everything in a Google search window. Again, this was prior to ChatGPT.
Right.
Now it's even more important. And I think he was right on the money 10 years ago. And you just confirmed this, that the younger generation and all of us, we need to better learn how to question things, not always to trust everything that's being in front of us. I mean, we all know fake videos and whatever, but it's the fundamental teaching method at schools and university that all the information are almost equally available to almost everybody.
That's right. That's right.
But what does that mean? Do we take it for granted, or are we being taught question everything and don't question just once the why, ask 5 times the why to get to the core of the crook of the problem? So I think we are not there. The educational system doesn't seem to be adapting quick enough. I can only imagine that you are in a situation as a professor and as a teacher in schools that you don't know how much ChatGPT is being used by your students, right? And what have they really accomplished for themselves versus, just go to ChatGPT. I can write an article in 5 minutes using ChatGPT with a few buzzwords. Somebody challenged me recently, why don't you write a business plan for the Transatlantic AI exchange? And I said, I don't even know where to start. And I challenged myself. I literally had a few bullets and I put it in ChatGPT and I said, please write me a business plan. And I took all my content from my website, threw it in there, and I got a business plan in 10 minutes.
Right.
It's scary and it's awesome. So it's both, right?
It is definitely both. And I totally agree with you. I think sometimes maybe because AI innovation is moving so quickly that we may not necessarily even think that, students are using it for that. But I think we're now in a time and a place where we kind of have to assume that students are going to use AI tools.
Absolutely.
And we actually should be encouraging them to think that way.
Yes.
And once that's embraced, we can move forward together, right? And all of us need to learn at this time. And truly understanding that you could write a business plan in a day, it's amazing. But that plan needs to be modified, right? Depending on what you need.
Correct.
So that's the piece that we really need to teach our students. You can't just do this and submit a paper, for example.
And
right?
Based on that example that you just referred back to again with the business plan, this is for all the younger generations. And, I don't want to age myself, but the fact is, asking ChatGPT to write something for you is one thing. But fundamentally, you need to have a baseline of a knowledge.
Right.
And an educational, healthy educational background, so that you can actually questioning what was just presented by you by ChatGPT and then fine-tune it. If you just blindly are always scratching the surface and then you take everything for granted, that's a dangerous future.
Definitely, definitely. And there are actually studies that have seen that when students rely solely on AI tools for education, when you take the tool away, they do very badly because they never really learn.
They never really learned it without,
Exactly. So ensuring that there is a baseline knowledge and understanding of the material before they jump into using the tool to kind of enhance that information and knowledge is critical. I think that is where education is at this point.
So Christie, drawing from your experience as a cognitive psychologist, What's your vision for the future of the Mills Institute in leading the charge in gender equity and racial justice in the era of AI? That's a big question.
Big question, but very exciting question because this is what we're here to do. So I previously mentioned some programs that we're creating. We have many programs that are created for women, for students who are first generation, and also historically marginalized populations of gender and race so that they could continue to see themselves as leaders. There are mentoring programs and research programs. But that is not all, right? I mean, creating a pipeline in order to see people as leaders and highlight them as leaders is one thing. But it's also very important for us as an institute that is global to be able to bring people together, to continue to innovate. So we're really a hub, an intellectual hub, to continue to think about what kind of new research can we do in this area, what's missing currently, and even bringing cognitive equity and AI together is a rather new field. It's actually an emerging field in the area of cognitive science. So I think in a lot of ways, I am very excited about some of the events that we're putting up together. So for example, we have a conference that we're planning for next semester in February that would touch on AI and equity. And along the way, we've actually created many gatherings for executives in the Bay Area already to come together to discuss where is the future of AI and education and equity in general, right? Because when you think about equity, I think a lot of people just immediately jump into guidelines and regulations. But I would like to take a broader view as to how can we actually, first of all, embrace technology to advance equity.
Yeah.
And second, how can we create change to the society structure so that we can create more equitable innovations, right? So those are two different pathways that we're trying to create here at the Institute. And I'm excited to do that.
And do you have programs, incubation programs, or do you partner with external incubators here in the Bay Area or East Coast or West Coast? Or is there a program behind it for somebody who wants to have like a hands-on experience and maybe even out of a research project, start a company? Is that possible?
Yeah. So, Northeastern is very good at doing that, right? Encouraging our students to think about entrepreneurship, to think about creating new ideas. So at the Institute, we actually collaborate very closely with the Institute of Experiential AI, and we've actually put together many events. So the upcoming conference, for example, is open to the public, and we would love people to come join us and to really be thought partners.
And that's in February next year?
Next year,
yes. Here on campus?
Here, on this campus, yes. Okay. You're welcome to come back.
I will certainly do that.
Yeah, so I mean, we have that, but we also are always open to partnerships. As I said, the Mills Institute is rather new, right? So our programs are still in development phase, many of them, but at the same time, we can't do this alone. We have to do it with partners. Yeah. So if any of your viewers or customers or partners are willing to come partner with us, we're open to that conversation anytime.
I actually have somebody in mind.
Oh, awesome.
One of the leading German universities. And the representative is in San Francisco. And I assume you're coming to our conference, Remarkable Women in AI?
Yes.
I will make an introduction personally because he will be there.
Oh, awesome. That's amazing.
So maybe just quickly on a different note, we didn't touch that at the beginning. Have you been in the Bay Area for a long time? Have you been grown up here, or what's your background and how did you end up in the Bay Area? And is the Bay Area the place where you believe all of this actually can be tangibly addressed?
Very good question. So my background, I actually was born in Hong Kong and grew up between Hong Kong and the UK. So when I was young, Hong Kong was under British rule. So I actually went to school in England. I actually did my undergraduate degree in Toronto, Canada, so another country. So my cross-cultural background comes from the fact that I just traveled the world as a child. And then I came to the US for graduate studies. I was actually at MIT before I came to Mills as a professor. And in fact, I have been here in the Bay Area for 17 years. So this is home for me now. And I do think that there's a lot of potential here for us to continue to grow the work in equity and AI and cognition. Because ultimately, Silicon Valley isn't far from us, right? So a lot of technology companies are in this area. And the topic of equity spans all industry. It's really not just about equity in AI. It's really about equity in general, right? So for the Mills Institute to be here, to be able to continue the legacy of gender equity and racial justice, is truly exciting. And I think the opportunity is probably greater than we could even imagine at this time.
I leave it with that. This was a fascinating conversation.
Great.
I hope some of the viewers here get some interesting ideas about the cognitive aspect of the AI area that we are just literally at the beginning at. And I can encourage every younger person who is listening to this, check out the Northeastern programs, check out your program specifically, and I will do everything that I can if I get some leads to bring them over to you, and maybe something useful comes out of it.
That would be
so. With that, Christie, thank you very much. And I'm looking forward to have you at our conference in a few weeks at the SRI Park.
Thank you.
Right.
Thank you so much, Thomas.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
everybody. Bye-bye.